The Razer Blade 16 is one of the most unique laptops I've ever seen. I just wish I could recommend it as easily as the Blade 15. Here's what makes it special. It can handle 4K gaming just as well as high-speed 1080p gameplay thanks to a really revolutionary dual-mode screen. It's also one of the fastest gaming laptops around thanks to Intel's new 13th gen CPUs and NVIDIA's latest GPUs. You can even throw a 4090 in there, and that's pretty special. But, you know, all that comes at a cost. It's noticeably heavier than the Blade 15, and you'll have to pay dearly just to own it. It's like Razer put another Razer tax on top of its already high prices. For some people though, I'm sure the cost is worth it. The Blade 16's MiniLED display can natively support 4K 120Hz and 1080p 240Hz. Now, the key word here is natively. You could always take a 4K screen and lower it to another resolution, but what you're left with is usually kind of a muddy mess. And standalone 4K screens typically max out at 120Hz as well, so you don't really get the really fast refresh rates you want from a gaming laptop. What's really special about the Blade 16 is that it delivers both of those resolutions just as sharply as a standalone monitor, and honestly, that's kind of a feat. Previously, you'd have to choose between a 4K screen with a much slower 60Hz or 120Hz refresh rate, or a standalone 1080p or 1440p screen that can go a lot faster. The Blade 16 is the only laptop that lets you have your gaming cake and eat it too. The only real downside with this feature is that switching between those two modes is kind of annoying. You have to go into Razer's app and actually select the specific modes of these monitors, then do a full reboot. But you know what, given how miraculous this whole thing seems, I don't think most people are gonna have a big problem with that. You may wanna just stick with the mode you're most comfortable with, maybe 4K to get the best resolution, and flip over to 1080p if you wanna do some competitive gaming, or on the other hand, you could stay in 1080p mode until you want those extra pixels in 4K, maybe when you're watching a movie or you're playing a much slower paced game. Now to be fair, maybe instead of thinking of the Blade 16 as a oversized Blade 15, you could also think of it as a shrunken down Blade 17. And maybe that perspective kind of gets at what Razer is doing here better. If you're buying a 17-inch laptop, you kind of know you're getting something big, you're getting something that's not super ultra portable, but you're doing it for all the gaming power. And previously, the Blade 17 was the only way to get the fastest CPUs and GPUs in Razer's laptops. Now you can do that with both the Blade 16 and the new Blade 18, which is even bigger as you'd expect. Both of these laptops feature Intel's 13th gen mobile CPUs and NVIDIA's 40 series graphics, including the 4080 and 4090. And that's pretty special because the 4090 and the 90 series in general wasn't something we've ever seen on laptops before. And of course, it's not as powerful as the desktop version, but based on what I've seen and the gameplay I've seen, this is a very powerful GPU to be stuck inside of a 60-inch laptop. One weird thing though is that the dual mode display feature is only available on the Blade 16, it's not on the Blade 18. It could be that, you know, Razer couldn't make that technology work with a larger panel. I don't quite know what's up there. But it is funny that the Blade 16, the smaller computer, is technically the most advanced one that Razer has in its lineup now. In practice, our Blade 16, which features the fastest Intel 13th gen CPU and the 4090, truly excelled at both 4K and fast 1080p gaming. For both Halo Infinite and Cyberpunk, I was able to crank the settings all the way up, turn on ray tracing, and still get some really impressive frame rates. And also, everything just looked very crisp and bright thanks to that mini LED panel. And that's something that's really helpful when it comes to HDR, because typically laptop and computer monitors, if they don't have mini LED, if they're just relying on a standard LCD panel, they don't get very bright, and they're kind of disappointing when it comes to overall brightness, so this is a big step forward. Thanks to the sheer power of the 4090, the Blade 16 delivered well beyond 60 frames per second in 4K mode, and honestly got close to filling up the 120 FPS that you would need to max out the 120Hz refresh rate. Halo Infinite reached a very playable 80 frames per second with ultra graphics settings, and Cyberpunk 2077 got about 70 FPS in high graphics mode with ray tracing and everything turned on. It looked glorious. Just the desert vistas, everything you're seeing in that game looks tremendous and is honestly a testament to how far graphics have come. Even though it's not a super high frame rate, it was still amazing to see that in 4K on a laptop like this. And given all that 4K performance, I wasn't too surprised when the Blade 16 soared well past 200 FPS in 1080p mode in Overwatch 2 and in Halo Infinite as well. You can crank up the graphics settings and, get close to 200 FPS. You could lower a little to go well past that to get up to 240 to fill out that display. However you choose to configure it, gameplay just looks so much smoother in 1080p mode because you can get well beyond 200 FPS. So, you know what? I normally have not been a believer in super high refresh rates, but actually seeing it side by side on a single machine, I could definitely feel the difference between playing at 100 to 120 hertz and then playing at 200 hertz and above. In Overwatch 2, it almost felt like I was playing better, to be honest. Like everything felt smoother, lining up shots in particular just felt a lot more accurate and reflexive. The more time I spent with the Blade 16, the more I could see it being for a very particular kind of gamer. Because you know what, if you wanted this sort of technology before, if you wanted to choose between having a very high resolution screen or a very fast refresh rate screen, you had to buy two different laptops or buy a laptop and buy a separate gaming monitor that could kind of fill your needs in different ways. So kudos to Razer for doing something really interesting with the Blade 16. Now, as much as I enjoyed the Blade 16's gorgeous display and incredible performance, I didn't like lugging it around my house as much. It weighs 5.4 pounds, which is a full pound heavier than the Blade 15. Now that might not sound like much, but it does make a huge difference when you're moving a machine from room to room, or just juggling it on your lap, or stuffing it in a bag to go out for the day or something. I think the Blade 15 was sort of the ideal because at 4.4 pounds or so, it kind of fit in with other 15-inch ultra-portable laptops and, got a lot of power in there. The Blade 16, meanwhile, feels like a gaming laptop. It definitely feels like you have a big chunky thing in your bag, and it's just harder to live with. But you know what, again, maybe I should be comparing it to the Blade 17, which weighed over 6 pounds and certainly made its presence even more known. So it does seem like the Blade 16 may be more meant for somebody who just wants a very big screen laptop and as much power as possible, but wants it a little more portable. I just don't think you should be thinking of it as a revised version of the Blade 15. And I think that's worth pointing out because when we see 16-inch laptops coming from any of these companies, including Apple and Asus and others, the 16-inch models tend to replace the 15-inch models because they have thinner bezels, they could just cram bigger screens into cases that are very similarly sized to the 15-inch models. That's not what happened here with the Blade 16. On the non-gaming front, the Blade 16 excelled at everything I threw at it. I mean, no matter what resolution you're looking at, you have a really fast screen that is ideal for scrolling through web pages and documents. It's so bright, the HDR is so good, it makes videos pop just right off the screen. Razer has had great keyboards for a long time, and this one's no different. It is a kind of shame that we're not seeing a mechanical here just because Alienware and other companies are offering that. For what it is though, it still feels very good to type on. It's nice and wide so I could spread my fingers out well, and it's very responsive for gameplay, and I even like the little LEDs all over it, including the little highlights for the WASD keys. This time around, Razer also increased the touchpad size quite a bit, I think maybe to make it more like the MacBook Pro 16-inch. It's big, it's smooth, it's nice to have, and it made scrolling and moving around Windows so much easier. You can also expect to do a decent amount of work on the Blade 16 without recharging. In PC Mark 10's Office battery benchmark, it lasted a little over 5 hours. That might not sound like much, but other gaming computers we tested recently last between 3 and 4 hours, and that's just a lot less useful as an office machine. So I think you can actually do a lot with this. Given its added heft, as well as its higher $2,700 starting price with the RTX 4060, I can't honestly recommend the Blade 16 to most buyers. Not when the Blade 15 is still around and starts at $2,000 with the 3070 Ti. If you want the 4060 on that computer, you just have to shell out another $500. And if you're mainly intrigued by the dual mode display in the Blade 16, that costs $3,300 at a bare minimum with the RTX 4070. Our review unit with the 4090 and 32 gigabytes of RAM cost $4,300. I don't expect many people are going to be dropping that kind of money. But you know what, for the discerning gamer and somebody who has dreamed of having a screen that can do multiple things, can go between 4K and 1080, this is kind of the answer to everything you've been asking for. Ultimately, the Blade 16 is one of the most innovative laptops we've seen recently, thanks to that dual mode screen. But I do think most people will be better off with the Blade 15. You'll get a better deal. You can live with it. You may not need to move between different screen resolutions, but it sure is fascinating to see something like this in the wild. Stay tuned to Engadget.com for more of our gaming laptop reviews, and if you dug this video, be sure to like and subscribe.